Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Herbal Mana podcast. And at Herbal Mana, we are delving into all things pain, especially chronic pain, whatever the source, so that we can hurt less and live more. Today, we get to hear from Natalie Viglione. She puts out some awesome information, not just dealing with the physical aspect of pain, but much more broad, dealing with many other things besides just the sprained ankle, the owie, the chronic inflammation. There's more to it when we're talking about pain or suffering. So Natalie, welcome.
Thank you, Todd, for
Being
having
here.
me.
This is awesome.
Yes, excited for our conversation.
Yeah. Well, to start with, tell me about that awesome corporate career, just a tiny bit. Now you've got a background that didn't serve your needs, didn't treat you as well. Why didn't it? What was the problem with the corporate thing?
Well, it's so wonderful when you actually get out of something and you can look back and go, yeah, this is exactly what went wrong. Talk about pain and suffering. I happen to really be called into psychology and human behavior and humanity and just looking at like how do people take action? What is, the reason for doing things? And the interesting track is that kind of brought me into the marketing realm, marketing, sales, business development. So doing, the really tough jobs in these corporate places where you're on the line for making them lots and lots of money with potential of making lots of money too. And I did get to that lots of money place, but I realized as I got further into those six figures, the, money, the executive track, my soul was like splitting from me. And my heart was in pain because it was not of high integrity. I was working in agencies, marketing agencies in Manhattan, New York City. And if anybody has ever seen Mad Men, I will tell you that essence of Mad Men in the agency world is literally still very much a thing today. The drinking at noon, the drinks after, the crazy nights, and, it was really toxic. So that is really what happened in that entire career. It got to the point where I realized, wow, I'm in an extremely toxic loop here. And I'm being asked to exit and start my own mission, my sacred mission. And I was like, okay, let's do this. So I left, but it was 17 years, and you really look at that and I'm like, oh, well, it's not really a surprise why I got so sick, why dis-ease settled into my body. That fast track, work hard, play harder, that kind of mentality.
Kind of interesting. I've got a daughter, Natalie, who was in marketing and in an agency the last 17 years, but it was a soul-sucking experience for her. Eventually, she left to do something different, using the same skill set, but in a much better environment, directly with the company, and she is flourishing. But in that agency, oh man, life was tough.
You're alive. Yeah.
It just took her energy. It took her spark. It
Yes.
was not good.
Well, apparently Natalie have the same experience in those places. So tell her my heart is with her because
I will tell her when I see her. She's coming to visit.
That is so funny.
From Utah, making the drive up to visit.
Cool. Nice.
Quite a change going from the corporate world to what you do now. Quite a enormous change. And then to move from New York City to, you said, Eastern Tennessee when we were talking before. Not too many Manhattan skyscrapers in Eastern Tennessee.
Nope. Definitely not.
I like wide open spaces. I grew up on a ranch in Idaho. Not an enormous ranch. Big enough, lots of space. My folks still live there. It's about 8 miles from where I live today. And I get out there once or twice every week, breathe some fresh air, get out of town. It's kind of nice.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's actually why we left. It was time to breathe again because I had been in San Francisco for almost 9 years in that area and in San Francisco proper, and then jumped to New York City. So, I mean, it was just, and I'm an empath and a hypersensitive soul. So you can imagine how much energy I was eating up every day. Yeah. Yeah. So I learned a lot from those
That's good. It's good to have
Yeah.
those times to go
Yeah.
through because you're not there currently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to make that break.
Yeah.
You have a podcast.
Yeah.
How long have you done the podcast?
Well, I launched it in 2018 officially. So
Oh,
quite a long time. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's Disrupt Now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I don't know where it is other than Spotify. That's where I found it. That's where I've been listening to it. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. 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 It's, I think in all those little things syndicates to all these little platforms like iHeartRadio and stuff too, and the podcast things. But yeah, it's been, I do realize something. I've come to the full realization. I started it because I had a dream and got all the messages to, this is why you need to start it. There's going to be a lot of disruption coming up. And obviously that was very, very true. But what I realized, it's like, sometimes we receive messages very much ahead of maybe the curve of where things are at in the world. And I realized, there's still a lot of fear around disruption because that word is like, I think very easily we go into the, ooh, that means change. That means kind of like it almost like the brain goes to chaos first rather than, ooh, disruption for the good. Like I get a new trajectory, like all new pathway. It's that frame of mind still is very much going into that more negative pathway rather than looking at disruption as like this. Actually, it's quite a beautiful art of getting up and out of whatever thing that we're stuck in. It could be, could list 100 things that potentially need to be disrupted for great change to come in. So that's been a really intriguing learning, actually.
True, especially for change. I think we're somewhat conditioned to fear change as a kid. Change was awesome, something new, something exciting. It's another adventure. With years of training and reinforcement, it does become something potentially quite negative unless we get a little bit of retraining, disrupt that thought pattern.
Right.
If I go to your website, that's also Disrupt.
Yeah, Disrupt Now Program.
DisruptNowProgram.com.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who are you serving with that website?
Well, this, it's very intriguing. It's evolved a lot. I think that often, especially when you're bringing in healing components, that it's like so much is being revealed, things that have been hidden for a very, very long time. And so we're actually able to reclaim a lot of wisdom, knowledge that was hidden. So my ethos has really come around to how can we really disrupt unhealthy patterns in our day-to-day habitual operations, if you will, of our, for me, it was binge drinking on the weekends during that corporate career leading to good things or taking my health away, so really disrupting these patterns that have led to, again, the dis-ease in the body. So today, I serve a very different person, a human, than I did even previously. And in the now time, I'm even helping and assisting fur babies. And in fact, I had seen one of your videos about, DMSO and pets. And that's actually, DMSO is one of those hidden brilliant things that is coming into the light more and more. So the humans that I'm serving today are people that are really tapping into or seeking to tap into more of their ancestral wisdom, bringing that through into how are they eating? How do their unique ancestral bloodline eat? Because that is going, they can be very different from regions, within this world. I'm working with people that really are ready to get to the root cause of challenges that they're facing. Many of us think that we're doing the right things every day and are in all of the ways that we can think of. But what I've discovered is there are deep, hidden imbalances in the body at a mineral level that sets our body up for we're not able to bring harmony within. And so when that happens, it's like we can do all the right things, but again, health challenges become maybe more extreme, or, we have all these crazy things happening like massive fatigue. And we're like, I feel like I'm doing everything right. What's going on? So that's another person that I'm very much here to help. And then also those that are seeking the magic again, seeking to really tap into spiritual and emotional alchemy, where, through that one can gain so much clarity and space to allow more emotions to be cleared from the energetic bodies, the astral body, and more of who they truly are to be able to have space to come in. So those are just, a few examples of the humans that I'm serving today, which again is a very
I want to grab
different.
onto one of those things. For us, we make creams and topicals. We're addressing chronic pain, but it's only part of the picture. One of the reasons that I heard your podcast and we sought you out. The healing journey can be partly physical. Sometimes you can reach for a product, and that's awesome. Got some pretty
Yeah.
good stuff. Like you mentioned, the MSO, it's beautiful, but there's more to the journey. What can you do, or what can you give us advice on as far as the healing side from the spiritual aspect, the emotional aspect that you're not going to get addressed with maybe a PT session or one of our awesome topicals? Give us more of the picture, because it is incomplete when we're just looking at the physical aspects.
Yeah, it is. And, it's so interesting. I have always been a very, for lack of a better word, just a very spiritual person. But in my own unique way. And I'm very anchored in that. And so I'm in my later years now. When I got really ill, it was in my late 40s, right as I was turning 40. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, what is happening? Feeling that hopelessness begin to set in. Because what happened is, you go the mainstream route, and I'm like, doors are closed before you even, but there's sometimes, they kind of hijack testing. If you need to get scans or something, that's a pathway that has to happen on some level. And so, I wasn't really seeking answers there. I was really going into the natural healing world to see what's going on. But even in that realm, I wasn't getting the answers that I was looking for. And I remember very, very plainly that I was doing a lot of physical things. I got pushed into the route of taking like hundreds of supplements a day. And I was like, that doesn't feel right. And then really had to stop in my tracks and think, okay, wait, there's other things here. There's a lot of emotional, even when we don't really believe or know that there's emotions that we haven't dealt with, or we felt like we've dealt with those emotions. What actually is happening is often that emotion is kind of trapped in that astral body, which, we can't see it with our physical eyes, but you can take photographs of this via, a very specific type of photography to see the auric field. But that astral level carries that emotion. And when these emotions get trapped, again, even if we're like, no, I'm good with that whole thing that happened. Well, you're not clearing it in that astral field. And so that is the flower essence alchemy that I bring into the mix, because flower essence is really, you talk about magic, but it's not magic either. It's just, it's when you really think about what they are, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They're here as conscious beings to actually help us with the spirit that they carry and the energy that they carry. And so if that's how flower essences are working, it's actually working on that spiritual and emotional alchemical level to transmute emotions and energies that have been carried along for too long. And so it helps us detox even just that field, because that field can very much block our energy centers in our body, in as much as it also then, we go really inside. And that's where we can get into the root cause protocol stuff that I've learned and got certified in, because it was like magical to me to actually see there's so much more to this story than meets the eye. So you have the vibrational layers, but also, besides the physical, there's these deep inner layers where energy is made at the mitochondrial level, at the cellular level. And when we really think about, when we look at this world, we see there was never a thing called chronic fatigue syndrome, even 20, 40 years ago, as huge as it is now. And that's how it kind of, when you look at the lists of symptoms, which they call, diagnoses, wow, that list has just gotten longer and longer and longer. And things that didn't exist even 200 years ago now exist. So we have to look at what has changed. So there's this mineral imbalance that's happening within our bodies. And when we go to that level, now we're working on, it's a different kind of alchemy and how we can assist our body to begin to harmonize from the inside out, as we're also working on these vibrational layers to detox these emotions and things that have been trapped for, often sometimes a long time when we really think about it. So that's a nutshell.
So how do we talk to our guys that are going to tune into the podcast? Because when the guys start to hear energy, they're thinking, oh my gosh, it's more woo-woo stuff. And yet we all understand that our bodies, besides being energetic, they're electrical. Without that side of the energy, which even us guys can get, we can understand that. Nothing functions. You have to have everything functioning electrically, impulses, everything that needs to be conducted, all the signals to make the heart pump, the muscle flex.
Right.
And yet some guys have a hard time getting past, to the woo-woo. However, guys, it's the real deal. If you have physical injury or physical trauma, actually even emotional trauma, you can store that up. You can hang on to it. And there are various ways to get rid of it. One way, this is where I started to learn. I got a massage from Maria. This is going back about 10 years ago. I was new to Maria. And she said, you've got a bunch of stuck stuff. You've got stuck fascia, stuck this, stuck that. And she said, you need to buckle up a little because number one, it's going to be uncomfortable. I've had 20 orthopedic surgeries, so I've got stuff. But she also said, it's not just going to be uncomfortable. She said, prepare for the emotional side.
Yeah.
There will be an emotional release as we work through some of this.
Absolutely.
When you're helping somebody through that, how do you do it? When you're working on these trapped emotions, these trapped memories, problems, traumas, how do you start to attack that with somebody?
Well, there's several layers to it, but the interesting thing is when you're working on more of these, let's say the emotional trauma layers, through the flower essences and working with those, often, the combination of what is utilized within a formula is really imperative, because what you can have is the detoxification while strengthening. So someone will go through an emotional catharsis, it will start bringing up all these things. But, what I always tell and share with my clients is, you may spend some time crying these things out, or however it's going to come out, just know that it's coming. And the strengthening component of these formulas will actually allow it to lessen the blow. So it's not stuck emotion, if that makes sense. Because, we can feel grief, but we should feel grief or fear or anger or whatever it is, allow that to come through, and then it rolls out. So it shortens the time in which it comes through. So that catharsis time is actually shorter. But there's a lot of other ways to think about this also, is when, I'm really all about the simplification of what someone is taking into their body. From a minerals perspective, for example, how and what foods can be added to allow your body to get some of those minerals without you taking, again, 30, 40, 50. I was taking 75 supplements at one point, which was insane, which isn't helpful in some, because now you're just stressing your body out. But, simplifying. So thinking about even from a nutrition's perspective, like once you start to get supported on the mineral level, it's intriguing because a lot of these anxieties, the fears, the things that felt like they were part of you begin to lessen when your body can actually function, turn on the enzymatic processes properly. When it begins to function properly, naturally your body begins to be able to deal with these other things. So I usually talk, and I say this with like this astral level right here. So it makes it easier to work through the things that do come up as the body is getting turned on. So as vitality, vital life force energy, it's called a lot of different things. Qi in Chinese medicine, for example. When you turn all of these things on, that actually enables your being to be able to move through these trauma experiences or just these emotions that have been lingering with you for far too long. And then another level is, in the movement practices. And if anyone is familiar with Qigong, more people are familiar with Tai Chi, but Qigong and Tai Chi really go together. But Qigong is really this. I remember when I first started doing the practices, I was of the mindset, I got to go kill myself in the gym. I got to work out all the time. I got to work out harder, right? That's actually, made me more ill. So when I realized for who I am, for what I'm here to do, the warrior style workouts were actually taking me down the path of illness. And that's the other thing, in this society, we are taught that you have to kill yourself to look good, to, blah, 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 and you can go down the list. But that's not true for everybody. And so we have to think about our unique ways of how we can support our own bodies. But when I first started doing Qigong, I cried the first time because it was releasing the massive pain that I had felt, which was a trapped emotion, in my lower back, where I had a massive injury because I was also a marathon runner and all that kind of, stuff. And I had massively injured myself and got a herniated disc. It was just kind of downhill from there. But that emotion was actually energy trapped in that area, trapped in the fascia, trapped in the web of communication that is our cellular structure. And when I started working with my own energy through Qigong, my ability to move in and out of the emotional waves that has been a powerful, amazing practice. So, the movement side, many people have problems sitting silently in meditation, right? And that's, some of us love that. Some people are like, I can't do that. Well, if people can bring Qigong into their life, this is not a practice for just old people or whatever, because, we've seen them, practices in the park, for example, but it's really for all ages. I wish this was something that we were learning when we were like 4, because Qigong is literally working with your energy, moving your vital life force energy properly to channel through your body in the proper pathways. And so that is just another added flavor to the entire mix of how you can also use that kind of powerful, yet so gentle and simple movement to work with your own energy as well.
Still learning that part of healing. I grew up on a steady diet of John Wayne. In fact, just over there off camera, I've got a big old picture of John Wayne. He's still a big part of my personality.
Mm-hmm.
But I've learned more to it. I had a pretty cool breakthrough. This was with yoga, not Qigong,
Mm-hmm.
with yoga. We were on a family outing. We were in Utah, near Park City, and my daughters talked me into going to a yoga class with them.
Mm-hmm.
And we got up on our mats, then in walked the instructor, and he looked just like Curly from City Slickers, just like Jack Palance. And Curly led us through about an hour and 15 or 20 minutes of yoga, which I'd never done. And it was great. I got a little stretchier, and the emotional side, the emotional release was extraordinary. I did not expect that. As you guided us through a little meditation, a little focus, a little movement. Even got to me as a guy. And it was quite a breakthrough.
Yeah.
Both emotionally, and that just kind of opened my eyes to this, opened my eyes to the bigger world of healing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I say words like primordial versus ancient because, I've had some really profound, cool people on my podcast that I've been able to speak to as well that are, in ancient lineages of, trainers of Qigong. And I even had this one man on who actually trained in a very specific method in Indonesia, which still holds a lot of magic. And what I've learned is Qigong, while there's this medical Qigong, if you will, that is more about the healing side, again, working with your energy to strengthen and heal your body, turn on the innate healer really inside. There's another element to it, which gave me kind of this vision of the truth that in primordial times, ancient times, everyone did these kinds of practices because actually we were working with the elements. And one of the experiences that this man had is when he was in Indonesia and training, one of the master trainers did some movements, very specific movements, and then stuck his hand into the sand and called the ocean to him because they were on the beach, and the ocean came. And that is the magic that's actually been lost, that I think we are very much reclaiming again, because the awareness and the feelings of what's possible is probably far beyond most of our imaginations. But what's possible is true, what we say is magic, but really it's like the physics of how things used to work in this world very organically. And, my husband actually became a Qigong teacher and practitioner because the profound experiences that he had on his own healing journey led him into that practice. And it was just this, like you were just mentioning, an eye-opening experience of like, now I can feel my own energy. And when that becomes possible, we become so much more aware of what's like going on in our bodies. And, even in the bodies of our loved ones, or like I was talking about with fur babies, they're these open, beautiful, empathic souls. And you can start to see that their state of health is actually reflecting the state of health of humanity, as well as the state of health that's within the earth. So we have a lot of remineralization that needs to happen in general, big time, as well as just getting back into this feeling true energy sources that waves through everything, literally everything.
You mentioned flower essences. How do they figure into this? What is a flower essence? Is it energetic? Is it an essential oil? Is it something different? Or is it everything like that?
Yeah, well, it can be all those things combined, actually. But a flower essence is really working with the spirit of the flower, the essence, the energetic essence of the flower. The way that it's made is you take a flower, say it's a sunflower, for example, and you imprint it into living water, which isn't water that comes from our tap or distilled water, but living water that's structured and has a vital life force to it, which you can very much tell the difference of. And you imprint it with the sun, and the water stores the memory of the flower's energy. And what has been practiced for, again, thousands and thousands of years and was rekindled through, a gentleman that brought the practice back up again into the world. The realization is that it's just like homeopathic remedies. So you're actually imprinting the spirit or the essence or the energy of the said flower in this instance, and then you can basically store that energy in a bottle, and that is what you work from. You create like a mother bottle of whatever kind of flower essence that you've created, mixed with alcohol, because alcohol is the element that can mix with that water to be able to keep that energy alive. And then you can make the treatment bottles from that one bottle. And what has been studied is what these flower essences do, which kinds of flowers equate to the kinds of change, whether it's emotional or even physical. But flower essences are really working on that astral level, the emotional level. So it's a very beautiful, beautiful practice. And when you learn all the customized ways that you can blend these flowers together, it really is bringing, so much support and strengthening to whatever healing journey somebody is on. And it's simple. You can take it in your mouth. You can put it into water. It's like a tincture, if you will, or you can even use a spray and spray it, into your energetic field. So there's a lot of ways to bring it into your healing practices, and it's extremely easy. So it's not adding a burdening level of taking more things, supplement wise.
Wow. Now you're into that woo-woo stuff again. Way out in the woo. But I can tell you guys that are watching this, it's genuine. It works. My wife does something similar, not
Mm,
with a program like Natalie has, but she has a way to get the energy and suspend it in bamboo blankets, for instance.
mm.
And she can give those to somebody and they're more calm. Now, somewhat anecdotal because somebody might receive the blanket thinking, hey, it'll make me more calm. So I'm kind of triggered to be more calm. But I've seen it used on infants, on people with mental impairments. So they're just being given something. They don't know what it's supposed to do. And by golly, it works. It's real.
Exactly. And that is really the best way to see change is infants, kids that have no awareness and they're not bringing in their own biases into
That's what
the
convinced me.
what?
That helped me
Yeah,
because I knew I felt better. I thought, gosh, am I just expecting it? Is it
right.
a placebo? And that I would see
Yeah,
it on kids, infants, and some with just impairments who just had no idea.
exactly.
It works. So it's
It
awesome.
works. Yeah, exactly.
Do
Exactly.
you make these yourself?
I do. Yes. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's a very beautiful process. And the man that I've been learning from is what I call one of the few Jedi master herbalists, but he's very, it's really taking it into the perspective of remembering that all of these things that we have, cell phones and things like this, we look at it and we're like, oh, it's a cell phone. But when we really think about it, it's like cell phone, cell, communicating with other cells. So we are like human cell phones. And all of our cells communicate. And so that means that there's an energy and vital life force that's flowing through all things. So we can really bring it into tangible conversations by looking at these kinds of man-made devices that actually really mimic the innate divine human technology, as I call it. And that's sometimes an easier conversation to have because that's something that you can see. And then when you think about what it's doing or how they're communicating, how there's towers, we can start thinking about how not only our realm, our earth works, but then how each of us are very, very much a part of this beautiful living organism. And again, when you're working with animals, that's an easy place to see great change too. What happens to them when you use some of these energetic, especially homeopathic, which in a sense, flower essences are mirroring that same similar process.
It's part of what caught my attention as I was going through your material before we reached out. When somebody has chronic pain, they feel the pain. Maybe it's a shoulder problem. They feel the pain there. But the entire nervous system is affected. Everything gets amped up. We're more anxious, more tired, more stressed, just more frazzled. I can work on the shoulder and we can make some good progress. And that's only part of the puzzle. There's more to down regulating that sense of stress or overall pain, or use the term dis-ease. That's a great term, by the way. I like that because your whole body can be in distress or dis-ease, unable to really be at peace.
Yeah.
And we have to treat more than just the injured shoulder. We've got to look a little more broadly at what's going on energetically.
Exactly. Yeah. There's different scenarios of, it's like where we look at how did that injury happen? And then what happened, one of the greatest, most profound experiences that I've had was, when we really think about what we are, and, people say instead, there's trillions of cells or whatever. Whatever. Nobody can count every cell in a human body. Not possible. Let's say we have lots. Trillions is a lot. Whatever that number is, it really doesn't matter. But when they can't communicate properly, and when, sometimes pain isn't felt, and that's also not a good thing, because then whatever's happening in that area, it's going to manifest in some other place or in some other way. So the communication system really needs to be flowing and working well in our body, which really informs, are we in fight or flight, or are we in rest? So then we're working with our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So how is our body informing us of how we should be reacting in a moment? We actually, a perfect example is the fur baby back there that just did a shake. He was born with one kidney. So it's a longer story, but we didn't even know that because we adopted them. But anyway, the point is that because of that energetic missing piece of the other kidney in that adrenal gland, which obviously on another level is transmuting and working through toxins, working through fear and balancing that energy in the body. The interesting component is he needs so much support to be able to calm down his nervous system. So often we'll have to cover him with a blanket. We're giving him homeopathic remedies to calm him down. Anything that can tell him you are not in a situation where you need to be in stress, and that's where a lot of humans are living, in that stress. They can't even turn on the relax phase of their nervous system. And that being in fight or flight at all times, I know because I was there, is exactly how, again, and then the symptoms begin to show up. And symptoms can be pretty traumatic. Symptoms, a diagnosis of cancer, for example, is actually, it's not the thing that's happening. It is the trickle effect of what has taken place, because what was going on in the body wasn't dealt with earlier on in the game. We've become very disconnected from our bodies in this world, obviously, for all the reasons. I mean, it's, again, that work hard, play harder, and the rising living costs. I mean, we could go on and on about that stuff, right? We're all feeling that kind of pressure regardless, literally all over the world. And so if we can't turn on that relax phase, that we're just, that rigidity is really what can cause just a whole slew of things to take place in the body. And, your examples, the pain begins to show up, and you're like, what did I do to my shoulder? So
when somebody starts to work with you, how does it go? What's the process? Where do you start? What will they experience?
Well, a vibrational medicine session, what I do is a sacred soul health scan. And yes, that's the woo-woo. But what I'm really, as an empath, what I can do is I can
Wait, it's good woo. Woo is okay in this setting. Let's go.
I'm intuitively reading into their energy field as they're speaking. And we kind of go through a birth when they were in the womb up until whatever point they are at in their life. And that gives us a really good scan on how things have developed, where things are at. I also look into the field, I guess you could say, of energy, where I'm able to see into some places of, okay, well, what has happened perhaps even ancestrally that one is carrying? Because we are, again, very much connected to any generation before us. And just having that cognizance is really powerful and there's ways to clear that energy that has, again, accumulated over, hundreds of years, generations, whatever. But there's a couple other layers in here where I can also analyze blood tests and hair mineral tests, which actually is quite a profound way to see how does your body actually deal with stress, like right now, in this moment in time, when that's part of the root cause protocol training, which was profound learnings, because what is happening in blood testing and all these, in that realm of when we go get a test, we get some answers, right? We get, hey, it's in the normal or within reference range or whatever. This is okay. And then these things are sort of out of range. Well, unfortunately, it's kind of like as the world has gotten sicker, as vitality has lowered, those test numbers also have changed to reflect what is acceptable. But the question that I like to ask is, how healthy do we really want to be? Am I okay with reference range, normal? When I look around and I'm thinking, where's the vitality? And I'm speaking just in every age. Where's the vitality? That's what we want to aim for. It's optimal health and wellness. And so we even have to look at testing very differently. So what we were taught is to meld the hair mineral test which is basically like a stress profile test and the blood test. And combining those two can give us far greater answers than what we typically receive just in our average, checkup. That was quite profound to learn. So that's another layer that actually can be done as well. And I think that's
interesting that in mainstream medicine, there's so little testing, or if you get blood testing, it's a handful of things that are being tested. There's
exactly.
so much more information just waiting to be grabbed.
Exactly.
The hair sampling is awesome. Great historical snapshots. Fabulous. That the blood work, it's real, it's now, it's current, and man, you can learn a lot of stuff.
You really can.
I don't know why mainstream medicine doesn't embrace that. They'll get a hunch and then they'll test in one little area. And they might test 4 or 5, 6 things when you could test 40 things with the same blood draw.
Exactly. Yeah. And the mineral levels, you can't actually get mineral levels, even though they say they can. You can't get those from blood tests. So it's not giving us the full profile of what we can look at. And I feel like, that testing isn't for everybody. Some people are like, nah, it's intuitively just work through things. Other people are like, yeah, I really want to see, how does my body really handle this stress? Because all of us actually react differently. For example, there's there's similar reactions, and then there's unique reactions. So when we go into a very high stress time, the first thing that depletes in our body is magnesium. It goes bye-bye. And so if we don't have enough magnesium, the body's going to start looking for it. Like, hey, where's magnesium? I need magnesium, folks. And if your body doesn't have enough, it's going to start taking zinc, like your liver. Your liver will actually take zinc instead of magnesium. Well, what happens if you don't have zinc? Well, then what does it pull? So the innate intelligence of our bodies is like, wow, it's just magnificent. But when we don't have the right things, and when we're stressed, which, in today's world, there is not one being, even the trees, that aren't stressed. So we really, by looking at this truth and this reality, we can see how our bodies uniquely kind of lay down how we're stripping out minerals when we're in high stress environments. And, the thing is that high stress can be 2 years later. Like it doesn't have to be happening in this moment. A divorce, for example, could have happened 2 years ago, but the body is still reacting to that stress. And so these are other things that are really vital to look at too.
It is interesting to see how the body reacts. Magnesium is interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. Over 70% of adults in America are magnesium deficient. And if you are in pain, you're typically needing even more magnesium. And I can't quite find the science behind that. We know that it occurs. We know that if you have chronic pain, you need more magnesium than regular folks. And you've got to supplement. You've got to be able to find a way to get that in through nutrition somehow. And if you don't have it, like you said, things go haywire. Body does its best to patch things up. That just leads to other problems.
It does. It does. It is definitely that trickle effect. It's that when the gear can't do its job and doesn't have the lubricant, if you will, to do that job, then it just causes a whole chain of events that happen. And, chronic pain is really, or any pain is stress. Like the body is, it's interesting so a lot of these studies that all this information is gleaned from were studies that are literally 100 plus years old that have been suppressed. And so we have to, for me, I like, yeah, that's not surprising. But the truth of the matter is that at one point, a lot of this information was very known. For example, this is why organ meats were just part of, I'm sure you even know this. That was part of beef liver was just part of the natural diet of many times before. So generations before, that was just part of a diet. Today, that is not part of a diet.
Heavens no. It's too bad because it's such an extremely rich source of nutrition.
Extremely. It's one of the best sources for, all these things that are necessary. And especially when you go in the grass-fed beef liver. And so it's bringing back this kind of, I guess you could say, ancestral wisdom that was so innate and just known. It's bringing that back into our mix, because if we can eat and take in the nutrients that was once very much part of the daily diet, our ability to handle stress it goes up, so where you can actually turn on your, okay, I'm going to deal with the stress, and then now I can relax. So our body moves through things much faster and easier.
Folks are working with you. Do they have to go to Eastern Tennessee? Do they have
No.
to show up in person? How do you connect with people? How far away?
I have clients in Australia, so the time zones are a little funky to work with, but yeah, remote is totally fine. A lot of the testing, if somebody wants testing, every country has its own version. We just have to figure out what version, if it's not in the United States. And, it is available in Australia as well, for example. But sometimes we have to get very creative because, for example, New York State doesn't even allow someone to get these kinds of insights, which I can't even believe.
Puzzling, isn't it? Just puzzling.
Just
to
puzzling.
Withhold that opportunity to get information.
Yeah, why indeed?
Yeah.
I could answer that, but I won't.
Go on and on about that. I grew up on a farm ranch, and what we raised is not the same stuff you buy in the store these days. In fact, I was just out at the farm last night. Dad and I were talking about gardening stuff because it's almost that season again.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about tomatoes of all things.
Mm-hmm.
He grows some tomatoes. And I asked him, how long after you pick that tomato, a red, ripe tomato from the garden, you bring it in, put it on the counter, how long will it last on the counter? He said, 2 or 3 days. I did a little experiment last winter. I went to my local Walmart. I bought this beautiful tomato. I brought it home and I put it on the counter in the middle of winter to see how long it would last. And it lasted more than 3 weeks before I got tired of looking at it. It still felt firm. It was beautiful. It was red. It did not change. They've bred, among other things, they've bred the enzyme content out of that tomato so that it's more shelf stable. Well, that's awesome. Looks pretty. It looks nice and red a lot longer, but it doesn't taste good and it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do. You might as well eat this pen.
Yeah, it's not gonna deliver any of the nutrients that it should deliver, and that's throughout our ag system. So you have to be pretty picky. You mentioned grass-fed beef. You've got to be willing to make a little bit of effort. Otherwise, you buy a lot of fillers. Even going to the vegetable aisle, a lot of that turns out to be filler for your body, not fulfilling for the body.
Yes. And that brings up probably the most vital point that I think you well know. The earth is depleted, the soil is depleted of minerals. So, of course, what has happened? Our bodies are depleted. Animals are depleted. Plants are depleted. They can actually bounce back a little easier because they can do a whole lot more of alchemy, turning things into other things to use what they need. But, we are mirroring exactly what has transpired in our earth. And that, I think, is a very sad...
Industrial farming practices that have not served us particularly well. It's great to grow a lot of stuff. It's not so great when that stuff isn't nearly as good and nutritious as it ought to be. And worse yet, it's the toxic load from some, like wheat these days with glyphosates and all kinds of other things. So besides not having the nutritional impact, you've got a negative impact from other contaminants being introduced.
Intentionally. Yes. And, I won't even say the word because I know this is going onto mainstream platforms. So it starts with a G, ends with an 8. That is a whole other thing that is destroying health and vitality. And, that is, and I'm sure, coming from where you're, the farm and the organic and regenerative way that it used to be, knowing that I think probably one of the most critical waves of things that are being created is the regenerative farming practices all over the world coming up, faster and faster. But that it's almost like it can't happen fast enough, It
really can't. That's why we need to take some of this into our own hands, do a little gardening. If you live in an apartment in New York and all you have is a little balcony, plant a few things, do what you can.
Yeah.
take some of that control, take some effort, or got to do what you can to take that back.
Too.
Hey, what is Team Goo?
Great question.
Goo.
So, when I jumped out of corporate, like you're Natalie, I took all of that wisdom with me because it wasn't worthless wisdom. I just had to reframe it. So instead of the, horrid marketing practices, which are, I could go on about that, but marketing in the way that I think of marketing is like, isn't that just sharing somebody's magic? Like you're just telling the world, like, this is what I do. This is my gift for you guys. Do you want some? Or whatever these gifts are. And I think that's why that was always a soul-sucking world for me, because I was like, oh my God, this is so not what I thought it was going to be. And so anyway, I took that wisdom, and Team Goo is that outcome. And that arm of it, because my husband, we actually met in the agency land. And
it came out of it then. That's good.
Yes. That was ultimately why I left to go to New York City. That was the destined thing that happened. But so he's a video editing, he's a professional video editor. And so we started Team Goo together to be able to do marketing, but from my own lens, our lens, a new way of seeing it, which is more about sacred soul path illumination, illuminating the path that you're creating for yourself in your business. People say businesses, I say missions. So that's what Team Goo is. And that is evolving too, especially as my husband and I are now very much bringing all of our learned studies together into a new container that we're creating called Forge and Flow, which we're launching here in the next several months. And this is all coming together because, like you just said, we purchased land. We're going to be, moving into the realm of homesteading, if you will. We're building our home. We are getting back into the land, and that's our vision, is to really create a sanctum or a sanctuary where we can, do healing events, whatever you want to call them, there in our land. And getting close to the land again, energetically, physically, is just so imperative. Some folks have been living that way, and they haven't ever lived any other way, but some of us were very much taken on tracks of like, ooh, cities, they're pretty and sparkly. Let's go have fun in those. And then we realized, oh my God, they're killing me. I got to leave. So we're in that mode.
That's awesome. That connection to the land is so beneficial, and not just for nutrition, health, emotion, spiritual self.
Yeah.
And disease rates are a little different. If you put kids in the dirt, ADHD goes down.
Mm-hmm.
ADD goes down. There are all kinds of benefits from working the dirt, working the soil, getting involved. That's awesome. That's great. That'll be a good adventure.
Yes. Yeah. That'll be very great. It's a very trying adventure so far, but it's just the journey.
How many acres?
We got a couple, 1.56 to be exact, to start. But there's other land around us that we're like, start small and think big.
It's big enough for a big undertaking. That's awesome.
Yeah. About all we can handle to begin.
I love it.
Yeah.
And then eventually you'll do retreats, you were saying?
Yeah. We really want to bring people together, to whether it's, Qigong events or, making flower essences together, just all these kinds of things to bring people into a container that is safe and sacred and is really moving. I really have this vision. I would love to live in a village again where, everyone has their unique gift. They bring it to the table and we're all sharing, and exploring and learning all these wonderful things together, going back into the roots of what used to be, because that's where the magic can be found.
Amen.
From my lens.
I might need to send my wife your direction. You guys would be kindred spirits. Well, you are kindred spirits.
I love it.
Path, herbs, all kinds of things, which it's, like you said, a lost magic.
Yeah.
Definitely lost art. And there's quite a few people looking for it.
Yeah.
Quite a few people that want it, crave it, and then latch on when they see it.
Exactly. huge resurgence, huge resurgence. Through Dr. Terry Willard, who is the mentor in the Master Herbalism program, and the flower essences as well that I had done. He's been a master herbalist for 50 years, and he's slowing down, but he created this school back in the 70s. And he's like, at first when we started, like barely get people to come in. There weren't really herbal schools even at that time. There was a few, but very few. And now there's just this huge resurgence of people desiring this path, this kind of pathway again. So I see that that's a beautiful sign. It's a beautiful sign that our world is awakening to the truth of what organic and pure means rather than synthetic and not pure, because that has really taken us down a very
bad path.
Yeah.
Hopefully things will change. There is a bit of a push. Even on the national political level, there's some effort to make changes, and it's going to take some doing. I hope it happens nationally. It could certainly happen individually.
Exactly.
Person by person, family by family.
Exactly.
And I think it is gathering momentum. Maybe it's the kind of crowd we hang out with. Maybe that's why it seems like we're getting more momentum, but it sure feels like it's more widespread.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And, more and more conversations like the ones we're having is happening more and more and more, which I think is probably the most important aspect of it all, because it's like there has to be available options on the table. And that's what in the past I felt like was closed down, is options. That's often what happens, is people don't feel like, I don't know, what else am I supposed to do? What else is there? There's no other options. But there actually are a lot of options. It's just most of those doors have been closed purposely.
Well, thankfully we have people that are putting programs together, education together, teaching, and a lot of this can be shared.
Exactly.
And connect with you. What's the best way for folks to connect with you? Where should they start?
Well, I am doing a lot of changes to all the things, but in what will stay, actually, it's going to become my main hub, is awakeningmagic.com. And I spell magic with a K.
Right.
Only because I really don't want to have that misconstrued with like Las Vegas magic, for example. There's a difference. Yeah. So
Is that website up and going? Awakening Magic?
Yeah. It's forwarding to Disrupt right now, but soon it'll be its own new magical hub.
Okay, awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. That's cool. And I know folks could really benefit. A bigger world when it comes to pain, suffering, wellness. It's bigger than just popping a pill, taking a supplement, rubbing it on a cream. You need to look a little bit more holistically at what can be done. All right. Well, Natalie, I appreciate having you. Gosh, I could go on for another hour or two, but this is awesome.
This is awesome.
Appreciate your time. This is great. Folks, if you love this, subscribe, click the you like it, and reach out to Natalie. This will be a real treat.
Thank you, Todd. I really appreciate the time and the casual, beautiful conversation.
My pleasure. It really was. All right. Hang around for a second while